What's good, everyone? Jax here, and we need to talk about what just happened with Caitlin Clark and this DeWanna Bonner situation. Because while everyone's been focused on Bonner's jaw-dropping ESPN interview, where she said she wouldn't change a thing about scamming Indiana out of $200,000, the real story is how Caitlin Clark is privately processing this betrayal, and what it's revealing about her evolution as the franchise's cultural enforcer. Now let me be crystal clear from the jump. Clark hasn't given some explosive public statement calling out Bonner by name. But if you've been following the digital breadcrumbs like I have, filtering through the noise of press conferences, social media activity, and insider chatter, the signals point to something much deeper happening behind closed doors in Indianapolis. And what we're seeing is the emergence of a completely different Caitlin Clark, one who's learning that leadership sometimes means drawing lines in the sand when your teammates cross them. But first, let's establish exactly what Clark is reacting to, because Bonner's recent comments aren't just tone-deaf, they're a direct slap in the face to everything Clark publicly said about her former teammate.
Anything differently, I think my journey is my journey and I'm going to accept that. It carried me to where I am in Phoenix and it happened that way for a reason. I mean, really, that is a wild statement.
I wouldn't do anything differently. I take my journey as my journey, and I'm going to accept that it carried me to where I am, a Phoenix. And it happened that way for a reason. I mean, really, that is a wild statement. Really, DeWanna? Really? You wouldn't do anything differently? Not even. Oh, I don't know, actually showing up to earn that $200,000 you collected from Indiana? Not even pretending to care about the fans who bought your jersey? This is where things get interesting, though. Because remember what Caitlin Clark said about Bonner when she first arrived. Clark went on record praising Bonner as a veteran presence, someone she was excited to learn from, someone who could help elevate the team's championship aspirations. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, a different picture emerges of how Clark is processing this betrayal, and it's not pretty. The temperature of the online conversation suggests something deeper is happening here in terms of Clark's leadership development. Because this isn't just about one player leaving, this is about what happens when the face of your franchise realizes that the veteran she vouched for was essentially running a con job the entire time.
Refuse to show up to work while receiving money, while taking payment, you refuse to show up and do the job. And let's be clear, you wasn't even good while you was here, you was shooting threes hitting the side of the backboard.
First of all, the fans are the victim. The organization was the victim here. Like, why are we sitting here? She grew up in these articles, like she was a victim, like she did, like something was done wrong. No, the fans are a victim. They welcome you with open arms, they embraced you and you turned your back and you quit. And that's exactly what makes this so personal for Clark. She's not just dealing with a teammate leaving, she's dealing with someone who made her look foolish for believing in them publicly. Now, okay, let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter is too loud to ignore. Multiple sources in Indianapolis are suggesting that Clark's reaction to Bonner's no regrets statement was, let's call it colorful. I've been filtering through the noise, and the signals point to Clark having some very private conversations with management about what this means for team culture moving forward. Because when you're trying to build a championship organization around a generational talent, the last thing you need is veterans treating their contracts like optional suggestions. But here's what really caught my attention. If you analyze Clark's recent press conferences and social media activity, there's been a notable shift in her messaging about accountability and commitment. She's not mentioning Bonner by name, but the subtext is unmistakable. The real story isn't what Clark is saying publicly, it's what she's not saying. And that silence is speaking volumes.
You stole that money from Indiana. You signed up for that bread and didn't deliver. You didn't show up for work. You made up bullcrap excuses to not be here. She came over here. She signed a max contract. She knew Phoenix didn't have the bread. She got 80 here and went and got the rest over there. I think it's trash.
Refuse to show up to work while receiving money, while taking payment. You refuse to show up and do the job. And let's be clear, you wasn't even good while you was here. You were shooting threes in the side of the backboard. This is exactly the kind of unprofessional behavior that Clark is privately seething about. Because remember, when Bonner was stinking it up in Indiana, missing shots and half-heartedly jogging through possessions. It was Clark who was still publicly supporting her, still trying to get her involved in the offense, still believing she could turn it around. And then boom, the second Bonner puts on a Phoenix jersey, she's dropping 22 points and 11 rebounds like it's nothing. Funny how that works, isn't it? But the story doesn't end there, because what's really eating at Clark, according to the digital temperature I'm reading, is how this whole situation exposes the vulnerability of trying to build something special when certain players view their commitments as transactional rather than reciprocal. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the narrative threads, Clark's evolution as a leader has been accelerated by this betrayal. She's learning that sometimes protecting your organization means being willing to call out behavior that undermines what you're trying to build, even if it means burning bridges with former teammates.
But this is definitely going to be a part of her history, man, because the new wave is taking over. These new fans are watching. So at the end of the day, yeah, it's going to be a part of her history, unfortunately.
She came here as a starter, was stinking it up, got injured, and Lexi Hall stepped in, and Lexi Hall should have been the starter from day one. DeWanna Bonner should have never been a starter in an Indiana Fever uniform. That's a fact. And there's the brutal truth that Clark is probably thinking, but can't say publicly. Bonner never deserved that starting spot to begin with, and when Lexi Hall stepped up and showed what actual commitment looked like, it exposed Bonner's mediocrity for what it really was. Now here's where the meta-narrative gets really fascinating. The online conversation suggests that Clark's private reaction to Bonner's ESPN interview wasn't just disappointment, it was an awakening about what it means to be the cultural standard-bearer for a franchise. I've been piecing together the timeline, and there's a pattern emerging in Clark's public statements since Bonner's departure that suggests she's transitioning from trying to elevate everyone around her to being more selective about who deserves that energy. And honestly, good for her, because leadership isn't just about bringing out the best in people, it's also about recognizing when someone doesn't want to be brought along.
This is DeWanna Bonner. I wouldn't do anything differently. I think my journey is my journey. I'm going to accept that. It carried me to where I am now in Phoenix, and it happened that way for a reason. It didn't happen that way for a reason. You forced yourself out of Indiana, DeWanna.
The way that Caitlin Clark wants to play, which of course is the way that the Fever plays, that she is their nucleus. They want to push the ball down the court, they want to be quick, they want to be fast-moving. At 37 years old, that style of play might not fit, DeWanna Bonner very well. But that brings us to the inevitable question. If Bonner couldn't keep up with Clark's pace and style, why did she sign that contract in the first place? The digital breadcrumbs suggest this was always a temporary play for Bonner, a way to collect a paycheck while positioning herself for that Phoenix reunion with Alyssa Thomas. And Clark, she's figuring out that she was basically used as a recruitment tool for someone who never intended to stay. The temperature of the online conversation suggests Clark's private thoughts on this are pretty unforgiving. And I don't blame her, because when you're 22 years old and already carrying the weight of an entire franchise's expectations, the last thing you need is veterans treating your championship dreams like a side hustle.
Just don't understand this. I don't understand why DeWanna Bonner is taking these interviews at this point in time, because I'm like, look, you're in Phoenix, you've got what you wanted, you've got what everyone expected you wanted all along, everything's gone your way. Indiana haters are going to love you because you screwed over the Fever. They're going to love you because you screwed over the Fever. Phoenix Mercury fans are going to love you. Rival fans are going to love you because you basically screwed over the Fever. Fever fans are going to hate you because you screwed over.
If we're going to keep it real, Chloe Bibby, the new 7-day signee, has fit in and played better than the one who Bonner did anyway. Let's be clear here. Chloe Bibby came in first game, knocked down 2 threes, and that's got a sting for Bonner, knowing that a 7-day signee came in and immediately contributed more than she did in months of collecting that Indiana paycheck. But here's what I find most telling about Clark's evolution. The signals point to her developing what I call championship ruthlessness. She's learning that building a winning culture sometimes means being willing to cut dead weight, even when that dead weight has veteran status and a big salary. Now, okay, let's get deeper into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter from multiple Indianapolis sources suggests that Clark has been having some very frank conversations with front office management about preventing future Bonner situations. The temperature of these discussions, from what I'm hearing, revolves around accountability measures and contract structures that make it harder for players to mail it in while collecting paychecks. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of institutional thinking you want from your franchise cornerstone.
First of all, the fans are the victim. The organization was the victim here. Like, why are we sitting here, she up in these articles like she was a victim, like she did, like something was done wrong? No, the fans are a victim. They welcome you with open arms. They embraced you, and you turned your back and you quit. It's that simple. You quit. You refused to show up to work. You wasn't hurt. You wasn't sick. It wasn't a personal no, you just didn't want to be on the team. You came here, you stunk it up, and then you got benched. Just because you was okay with coming off the bench in another situation don't mean you was okay with coming off the bench in this situation. So I want to know what's the real? What's the real? Because you can't say, while you was here, you said, oh, I've never played in front of this many fans. You were embraced by the fans. You spoke highly of the fans while you were here. You were a starter, but you wasn't playing well. And that was nobody else's fault that you was shooting threes, hitting the side of the backboard, and you was smoking layups. And then your starting spot got took, and then all of a sudden you refused to show up to work. If we gonna keep it real, Chloe Bibby, the new 7-day signee, has fit in and played better than DeWanna Bonner did anyway. Let's be clear here. Chloe Bibby came in first game, knocked down 2 threes. DeWanna Bonner first game versus the gum on the bottom of the shoe, Chicago Sky. We had to jump through hoops of fire and do all types of abracadabra magic tricks to get her to finally score to break that. Here's a quote from DeWanna Bonner. I have no problem coming off the bench. I have never been that player. I don't feel like I have that reputation. Now, fair enough. You have won 6th Woman of the Year, respectfully. But that don't mean that's what you thought you were walking into. I believe you thought you was coming here to be a veteran leader, an OG, and a starter. She came here as a starter, was stinking it up, got injured, and Lexi Hall stepped in, and Lexi Hall should have been the starter from day one. DeWanna Bonner should have never been a starter in an Indiana Fever uniform. That's a fact.
A quote from the One to Bonner Times. I have no problem coming off the bench. I have never been that player. I don't feel like I have that reputation now. Fair enough. You have won a 6th Woman of the Year. Respectfully. But that don't mean that's what you thought you were walking into. See, this is what probably infuriates Clark the most. Bonner literally said she had no problem coming off the bench, won 6th Woman of the Year 3 times, proving she could excel in that role, and then the second her starting spot became questionable, she vanished with personal reasons. The hypocrisy is so blatant, it's almost insulting to Clark's intelligence, and the online signals suggest she's not forgetting this lesson anytime soon. But the story doesn't end there, because what's really interesting is how this situation is reshaping Clark's approach to teammate relationships moving forward. The digital breadcrumbs suggest she's becoming much more selective about who gets her public endorsement and private investment. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the temperature of recent team dynamics, Clark appears to be operating with what I call earned trust, rather than automatic respect for veteran status. And that's a huge evolution for someone who came into the league trying to build bridges with everyone.
The way that Caitlin Clark wants to play, which of course is the way that the Fever plays, that she is their nucleus, they want to push the ball down the court. They want to be quick. They want to be fast moving. At 37 years old, that style of play might not fit DeWanna Bonner very well. Like, that just doesn't highlight her strength. So I think it's probably a combination of style of play reasons, personal reasons. And yeah, like you said, at this point, she probably wants to win basketball games, make a little bit of
success and continued success in the system with Caitlin from last year, I think was the big reason that DeWanna Bonner was moved to the bench at all and kind of trying to figure that out. When I went back through last week, just kind of like poring over all of these press conferences and like public comments and like my interviews that I had done in Indiana, the thing that stuck out to me was the first day, I think, of training camp, DeWanna Bonner had mentioned like she had to catch her breath because these guys are fast.
Ground. And then you come in when you decide you game for your own determination. You try to figure out where you fit on the scene. It's going to take a little bit of time to go up, to be patient, it's going to take us a little bit of time to gel. Just be patient.
It looked like you was mad that Lexi Hall took the start.
Oh man, funny bone about it, but man, it is crazy to hear her say that. It is crazy. I can't hold you. The fact that now she's more sort of understanding is going to take some time to find your footing.
Everything's changed. We add pieces, and pieces come back. Where you get shot is normally the game before you probably won't get that same shot. And I'm just trying to figure out where you fit on this team. It's going to take a little bit of time to gel. So just be patient, but it's going to be okay.
It's going to take us a little bit of time to gel. Just be patient. Oh, man. Bonner. But, man, it is crazy to hear her say that. It is crazy, y'all. I can't hold you. The fact that now she's more so of understanding it's going to take some time to find your footing. It's, you have to be patient. Man, that's tough, Bonner. That's tough. Coming from somebody that literally gave up. You gave up on Indiana Fever, man. You should have gave it some time, Bonner.
It's, you have to be patient. Man, that's tough. But that's tough coming from somebody that literally gave up. You gave up on Indiana Fever, man. You should have gave her some time. The irony is absolutely delicious, isn't it? Now that Bonner's in Phoenix, suddenly she understands that it takes time to find your footing and gel with new teammates. But when Indiana fans and Clark were asking for that same patience, she was already mentally checked out, counting down the days until she could orchestrate her exit. I've been filtering through the noise, and the signals point to Clark viewing this as a masterclass in recognizing fake commitment early. Because the next time a veteran comes to Indianapolis talking about being ready to contribute and embrace their role, Clark will know exactly what questions to ask and what red flags to watch for. And that's actually a positive development for the franchise, because championship teams are built by leaders who can identify and eliminate toxicity before it metastasizes. Bonner inadvertently taught Clark one of the most valuable lessons in professional sports. Not everyone who says they want to win actually wants to do the work required to win. The temperature of the online conversation suggests Clark's private response to Bonner's no regrets statement was essentially, "Good, now everyone can see what I was dealing with." But here's where it gets even more interesting. The digital breadcrumbs suggest that Clark's reaction to this situation is influencing how the entire Indiana organization approaches free agency and roster construction. Because when your generational talent starts questioning veteran acquisitions, management pays attention. I've been piecing together the narrative threads, and there's evidence suggesting Clark now has significantly more input into personnel decisions. And why wouldn't she? She's the one who has to play with these people. She's the one whose championship window could be wasted by players who aren't fully committed. The online chatter from multiple sources indicates that Clark's evolution from diplomatic rookie to cultural enforcer is happening faster than anyone expected, and the Bonner situation was the catalyst. Now okay, let's get into speculation territory about what this means for Clark's long-term development as a leader. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the temperature of conversations around Indianapolis suggests that this experience has fundamentally changed how Clark views veteran integration. The signals point to her developing what championship teams need, the ability to distinguish between players who want to contribute and players who want to collect paychecks, and that's a crucial skill for any franchise cornerstone. Because here's the thing, great leaders aren't just defined by how they elevate good teammates, they're defined by how quickly they identify and isolate bad ones. But that brings us to the inevitable question about what happens next. The digital breadcrumbs suggest Clark is using this experience to establish new standards for what it means to be part of the Indiana Fever culture. And those standards, they're apparently non-negotiable. You stole that money from Indiana. You signed up for that brand and didn't deliver. You didn't show up for work. You made of bullcrap excuses to not be at work. This is the sentiment that Clark is privately echoing, according to the online temperature I'm reading. Because when you're trying to build something special, you can't afford to have teammates who view their contracts as optional suggestions. The fascinating part is how this situation has accelerated Clark's leadership timeline. She went from trying to please everyone and make everyone comfortable to recognizing that some people don't deserve that energy, and the online signals suggest she's never making that mistake again. I've been analyzing the patterns in Clark's public statements since Bonner's departure, and there's a notable shift toward emphasizing commitment, accountability, and earning your role rather than being given it. She's not mentioning Bonner directly, but the subtext is unmistakable. Clark learned that you can't build a championship culture while accommodating people who don't want to be there, and that's probably the most valuable lesson any young leader can learn. So what does this mean for the future of the Indiana Fever? The temperature of the online conversation suggests Clark is now operating as both the franchise cornerstone and the cultural gatekeeper. And honestly, that's exactly what championship organizations need. The digital breadcrumbs point to a new era in Indianapolis, where veteran status doesn't automatically equal respect, where players have to prove their commitment through actions, not just words. And that's a direct result of how Clark processed the Bonner betrayal. But here's the most interesting part. The online chatter suggests Clark's private reaction to Bonner's Phoenix success has been completely unbothered, because she recognizes that good stats on a mediocre team don't erase the fact that you quit on a championship-caliber organization. And that level of perspective, that's championship leadership thinking right there. The signals point to Clark viewing Bonner's Phoenix performance as validation that she was right to be frustrated with the lackluster effort in Indiana. Because if you can drop 22-11 in Phoenix, you obviously had that capability all along. You just chose not to use it for the team that was paying you. I've been filtering through the noise of this entire situation, and what emerges is a story of accelerated leadership development. Clark went from trying to elevate everyone around her to learning when someone doesn't deserve that investment, and the Bonner situation taught her that lesson in the most public, expensive way possible. But that brings us to the inevitable question about what message this sends to future free agents considering Indiana. The temperature of the online conversation suggests Clark's evolution into a cultural enforcer might actually be attractive to players who genuinely want to compete for championships, because serious competitors want to play with leaders who hold everyone accountable, not leaders who make excuses for underperformers. The digital breadcrumbs suggest Clark's private response to this entire situation has been, "Good riddance. Now we can focus on players who actually want to be here." And honestly, that's exactly the mentality you want from your franchise cornerstone. So when DeWanna Bonner sits on ESPN and says she wouldn't do anything differently, when she acts like collecting $200,000 for minimal effort was somehow justified, the real story isn't her shameless revisionist history. The real story is how Caitlin Clark is privately processing that statement and using it to fuel her evolution into the kind of leader who doesn't tolerate that behavior. And that evolution, that's what's going to separate the Indiana Fever from teams that make excuses for mediocrity. The online signals suggest Clark has learned that building a championship culture sometimes means being willing to let the wrong people expose themselves so you can focus on finding the right ones. And if that's not championship leadership development, I don't know what is. If this breakdown of Clark's leadership evolution and private reaction to the Bonner situation resonates with you, smash that like button and drop "Clark learned" in the comments. Because what we're witnessing is the real-time development of a championship mindset forged in the fire of professional betrayal. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, because as Clark continues evolving into the cultural enforcer the Fever need, we'll be breaking down every signal, every development, and every indication of how this experience is shaping her approach to leadership. The Bonner situation was expensive, embarrassing, and infuriating. But it might have been exactly what Caitlin Clark needed to learn how to build a championship culture that doesn't tolerate professional mediocrity. And that lesson, that's going to serve her for the rest of her career. We'll see you in the next one, where we dive deeper into how Clark's new leadership approach is already influencing the Fever's roster construction and team culture. Because this story is just getting started.